Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim Gross, and today I have with me Beverly Price, and we're going to have such a good conversation in just a few minutes. But as I always do, I'm going to start with a quote, and this quote is by Beverly, and I love it. So here it is. Self-empowerment doesn't have to be feared or be a mystery. It's your key to confidence in a rich and fulfilling life on the inside and on the out. So welcome, Beverly. I'm so excited to have you here. That was such an awesome quote, which we can talk about shortly. But first, in your own words, just tell us who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kim. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
You do.
Let's see. I am a divorce coach or divorce and empowerment coach specifically for women. And I grew up in a family that didn't value or did value me to a certain extent of being the child that they owned. Or that they possessed. They provided absolutely everything materially and comfort-wise, but they weren't equipped to foster self-worth, self-esteem, self-love. And in deference to them, they also weren't taught that. So it's not something that I am angry about. It is not something I'm resentful about. I think they did absolutely the best they could, just like I've done absolutely the best I could for my children. But I grew up in this environment. So as I went along in life, this self-worth or lack of self-worth, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-love kind of followed me. Whether it was in school, whether it was in relationships, if it was with friendships, if it was relationships with family, and it just followed me. And what I found was that one of my tools that I dealt with that was people pleasing. Was trying to be the person you wanted me to be. And that could be with my family, and I did that by trying to achieve. It could be with an employer where I tried to do everything they wanted me to and be an overachiever. In school, it could be still the overachiever in me. And with friends, it could be trying to be the person like you so you would accept me. And that manifests itself on the inside and out, both the feelings on the inside, but on the outside as well. You know, with friends, I tried to dress like you and look like you and have the hair like you. And with employers, I tried to look the part and look successful. And I found myself being that woman that's now called an imposter, where deep inside, I didn't think I had what it took. But if you looked at my outside, you'd say, man, she's the corporate executive that is strong and powerful and confident and has it together. And they didn't know what was going on inside. And after that, I began, after my journey and my healing, I began to coach other women on that process. And I specialize now in helping divorced women find their power, find their voice, navigate the divorce process, and come out the other side with a thriving life. But what kind of impressed me and set me on fire was some of the statistics that I've learned that, 79% of women don't consider themselves confident, and 1 out of every 2 don't think they're intelligent, and 4 out of 5 think that they are less than other women. Those are the facts and the reality of the situation. And I think that's tragic, but I'm in those numbers. I was there. And so that's a little bit of the background that led me into my journey and into my passion.
I love that. First of all, holy shit. Are you my freaking sister? Like, are you? You're my twin. I know you are because you just like ditto, ditto, ditto just gave my story. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Were you a straight A student?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, no, once I got a C in high school, and my mother didn't trust me with a key to the house. So I went with a girlfriend to the mall. My mother panicked and thought I had tried to kill myself because I got a C.
Oh my goodness.
That's
Yeah.
how deep it was. Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? You're so right. It's so sad, right? That
Yeah.
the statistics that you just mentioned, living it and going through it, it's incredibly sad. And I just was telling a friend the other day that I feel like I want to just help the whole entire freaking world because
Mm-hmm.
I feel most of the world feels on some level unworthy. They are living
But
out.
you are
Yes,
because you
yes,
take one step, you help
yes.
one person, and
One,
that helps the world.
yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And I think what I'm speaking to is just like how passionate I feel about how unfortunate it really is. Like, why the freak do we feel so unworthy as this?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even just in the United States because I work with people globally. And what I have found, even on doing interviews with the podcast, is that the human suffering is universal. It doesn't matter whether I was working with a girl in Singapore or a person in Canada or wherever they were, the stories were the same. The feelings of unworthiness were the same. And so it's just really, it's like, I say all the time, we are all essence. We're like the ocean. We're the same energy that is in the trees, in the flowers, the ocean. We are the same, and we forget that.
Well, just take a look back and think back to what we know about the caveman days.
yes,
Women were told to sit back, cook, tend the fire, and have the kids.
yeah,
Men went out for the strong, powerful activities, hunting
yeah.
and protecting, and more of the exciting stuff. And so, right there, from the get-go, genetically, we have
Yes,
been groomed to be less than. And
absolutely.
then as you go through the different civilizations, what you find is it's the patriarchal society has ingrained this in us. And one of the reasons it has is so they remain in power
Yes,
by keeping us down.
yes,
And part of that is them feeding this story that we aren't worthy.
yeah. And that right there, I think lends nicely into the next question because
Okay.
you worked in the corporate world, right? You worked
Yes.
in the man's world, and you even stated that you played small. Can you talk
Mm-hmm.
about that experience some?
Sure. Well, I think that one of the ways in which I played small was I was afraid to use my voice. I would sit now. Keep in mind, I was one of the top layer executives, and I was sitting in the senior executive meeting, and I wouldn't give my opinion until a man gave his first. And I was afraid of being wrong or being called out. And so, what was much easier for me to do was to sit back and wait and play it safe. The other thing that goes along with that is if there was something wrong, if somebody was being mistreated, if there was a horrible boss, I never spoke out.
Mm-hmm.
And I never disagreed with, I never left a company. I operated from a place of fear. And when I operate from a place of fear, all my different defects of character come out on parade. And I think back to some of the things that I did or didn't do, and I really regret some of them, because I think I could have handled it differently. For example, I found out that the president of a company that I was working for had had an affair with two different women that worked for me. And what would happen would be they would come and ask me for something, such as extra time off or extra benefits or something. And I would give an answer, and he would come back and reverse the answer, destroying my credibility. Now, did I confront him? No. I just took it. And it's not too different than if you're in a marital relationship or in a partner relationship where they dish it out and you just sit back and take it, whether it's verbal abuse, whether it's unfairness, whether it's them not participating in any of the chores around the house, those kinds of things. So it became natural to shrink. And it wasn't until later that I learned that there was this voice within me that was not wrong, that even if I disagreed with someone, or they disagreed with me, or they were critical of me, I still had my own voice and I still had a right to use it.
100%. Yes. Mm-hmm. And I have a question to follow up with that is,
sure.
What was it like for you when you were a child? If you had a thought or an opinion or a belief and it was opposite of what, and I'm not sure if maybe it was both mom and dad or one or the other was a stronger personality. Let's just say it was mom, and you try to assert yourself, what would happen as a child?
Well, it was my mom.
Okay.
My father was the traditional man of that generation. He worked, he studied, and he was off doing that in the basement, seemed like 24/7. And so he wasn't present emotionally and that kind of thing. And he was played very small to my mother. And I remember my parents then moved in with me and lived for 20 years. And boy, was that an experience. But I was crying because my mother had been so difficult. And my father said to me, Beverly, I learned a long time ago that your mother is a very difficult person to live with. Mm-hmm. So he chose to play it small. And so I learned that. You know, my mother wore the pants in the family. She could be very negative. She could be very critical. I think that I was probably a disappointment to her from the get-go, because I think she expected that a baby would fulfill her life and make her feel better. And I think she found that a baby peed and pooped and ate, and that was about it, and cried. Yeah. And was kind of disappointed. So I could disagree, but one of the things she also did was then cut me off. I remember she would go into her bedroom for days at a time, saying she had a headache. And I would be knocking on the door, apologizing for things that I didn't do to try and get her to come out. So, and in her defense, I think she had issues. Yeah. You know, her father was an invalid and her mother was focused on taking care of him, and they were poor and in the depression, and, you know, many, many things, you know. So she was raised to be the one who wore the pants in the family and that kind of thing. So, but she wasn't emotionally nurturing. Yeah. And I think as time went on, when my father was present, she became jealous of the attention he paid to me and resented me for that.
Oh, I'm sure. So first of all, I just want to pause for a minute. And thank you so much for being so open, so vulnerable. Honestly, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I feel like what people learn from the most and what helps them the most is to hear others share their story and say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I see myself in her." Like I said to you a few minutes ago, oh my God, are you my freaking twin? Because everything you're saying,
Yeah.
I'm identifying with. For me, it was my mom. My dad was the one who was quiet and he took all, the abuse. And then I ended up being like my dad. And there's just so many points in your story that I can connect to. And I'm sure anyone
Mm-hmm.
that's out there listening can also. So it's so helpful when we can be so
Thank
open
you.
and honest. So I love
Yeah.
it. So now
Well,
that,
if I can help
yeah,
one woman,
yes,
then I'm paying it forward.
paying it forward 100%. And so now we kind of like laid the groundwork. And what you really so beautifully described is what I work with, or who I work with, is the people pleaser and the perfectionist. And you named both masks, and this is Masks Off. And you took your mask off today. Again, thank you. And so now that we've named it, can you talk a little bit about your process and how you went from the self-loathing, the self-doubt, to self-love, and to be where you are now, empowered and wanting to help other women be empowered?
Sure. There's so many things that I did, and I don't know that I can say them in order.
Yes, of
So it's
course.
going to be more a hodgepodge. But one of the things I did was build a support system. When I was working and was a single mom, I didn't take time to build friendships. I was focused on working kids. And so it became obvious that I needed people, but more importantly, I needed healthy people who had gone through what I went through and gotten to the other side, so that I could learn from them as they were an example. So that was really important. The second was I had to take kind of a fearless look at myself and say, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then here's who I want to be. And what do I need to do to get there?
Yep.
And I had to look at everything I resented and process each one of those resentments as well. At the same time, I needed to look at all the good things about me. And that was the hardest thing in the world, because I didn't think there was anything good about me.
Yeah.
And part of that was kind of a daily process to start journaling. And it included 5 things that I find awesome about me and 5 things that I'm grateful for. And some daily reading, some affirmations, and some sticky notes on the mirrors that have some of those affirmations that I can see on a regular basis. Then it included being more conscious of who I let into my life on a relationship basis and getting rid of some of those relationships that were very unhealthy. So that was really important. I had to start looking at using my voice. When I felt more self-worth and when I felt more self-love, it gave me the courage to use my voice. And I'm now in a marriage where I'm with a healthy person for a change, and he appreciates me using my voice. Now, I'm really cautious about this because I think some people get the wrong idea of using your voice. It doesn't mean that I've been stuffing my anger at my husband for months because, let's say, he doesn't vacuum, hypothetically. And all of a sudden, I decide to use my voice and let him have it. right? That's not what I mean by using my voice. Using my voice to me is seeing the value in myself and seeing the value I have to contribute. And it also means that I go through this kind of decision process with what I'm going to say. Is it kind?
Yeah.
Is it necessary? And is it important? And I ask myself those questions. And if I'm going to deliver a difficult message, I ask myself, how would I like to have that message delivered to me? Yeah. And those types of things are kind of what I look at in the process. And those are the kinds of things I work with the women involved in a divorce that I coach, because in many cases, their whole life has been spent being a wife. And all of a sudden they lose that label and they don't know who they are. And their voice was always deferential to their husband. Mm-hmm. And so now they don't know how to use it. So it's important for them to, and then the other part of it is practice. Take baby steps, prepare to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And that's okay, you know?
That is beautiful that you said that, because that is the antidote to the perfectionist, because mm-hmm. perfectionist expects in just about anything, especially recovery or healing, is that I'm going to start at point A and I'm going to go straight all the way up to point B without any backward movement.
No,
there's going to be forward and back, forward and back. And I remember learning that in an ACOA group 25 years mm-hmm. ago from a counselor. She drew it on the board, and it's stuck in my mind ever since, that recovery is not a straight uphill line. So I'm so glad you named that. That's beautiful. So what I want to say, first of all, I love your process. It's beautiful. And I want to say or add in that one of the steps that I use I teach the 5-step power pathway to go from prison to paradise. And so one of the steps is about going inward, the willingness to go in and feel the feelings, because you have to, in my opinion, you have to feel to heal. And then the second piece, that's the W of power. And then the E is to embrace the inner child and or the shadow parts. So, because that's the part that is feeling so unworthy. It's our inner child. It's our little girl that's showing mm-hmm. up in these adult relationships. It was your little girl who was showing up in that office with that boss that spoke over mm-hmm. you. That's who was showing up. So my question is, did you do anything similar to that? Did you do any kind of either with a therapist or even by yourself, where you really felt like in order to move to the next level, you had to heal your inner child some or a whole lot?
Well, back when I was going through this, I didn't have coaches. And so I had to go it alone. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about coaching women in divorce and such and empowerment, is because I didn't have that. So I kind of had to come up with my own process. And then much later in life, like in the last 5 years, maybe, I worked with a coach who took me through that experience. And the first time she said, look at this little girl and see how beautiful and innocent, I couldn't see the beauty in the innocence. Yeah. I saw the disappointment and the jealousy that my mother had for me. And then as more work happened on myself, all of a sudden, I could see that beauty and I could see that innocence, but it takes a lot of work. And to me personally, I think having a guide as a coach number one, saves so much time. I'm 65 and, just learning certain things.
Yeah.
But it also helps you do it with less pain and I think with better results.
I would agree. It helps so much to have someone by your side who can bear witness and
Mm-hmm.
hold that container for
Mm-hmm.
you when you're going through that work. Because as you said, one, it's a lot of work and it is painful. It is painful, but it's so worth it because on the other side of that work is the possibility for more joy. Like I now have spontaneous joy that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have before this work, to have more
Right.
peace, to have more sovereignty, freedom to, I mean, oh, Jesus, when we can unhook from the people pleasing and perfectionistic pattern, and you can just start living freely from that place instead of a pattern, you can look outside the window and now the sky is blue. You can actually see it. Do you know what I mean? Like you see
Mm-hmm.
things because that veil has been lifted. So
Yeah.
it's so worth what you're saying to do the work and to work with a coach because it can help the process. It not that it can, it does, in my opinion, it does help the process to move along either more quickly or in a safer space.
Yeah. I like to think of kind of my steps is the first step is acceptance,
Yeah.
acceptance of where I am. The
Mm,
next step is willingness to do whatever I have to do to feel better.
yeah.
The third is doing the work and being self aware. And the fourth and most important is celebrating.
Yes.
Celebrate and appreciate who you've become.
Yeah.
And I think those are just very important to the overall process. And the other thing I'll add that I did that I believe is absolutely critical is establish a daily routine of maintenance,
Yes.
or work or maintenance, because I can achieve certain things, but if I don't do the work to maintain them, I can slide back into feeling small. I can slide back into not feeling worthy and those kinds of things. So it's really important to have a ritual, have that daily routine that you go through that emphasizes the beauty in you and the new you.
That's a great point. I have had that backward slide too when
Mhm.
if I'm away on vacation or the holidays. I don't really stay on my daily habits quite as well.
Right.
Do those things that I'm doing every day. I start to feel like, ooh, there's that old pattern again.
Right. Yeah.
So I get what you're saying. I have to just say that this has been an amazing conversation. You have offered so many gems in this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
Sure, it's going to help at least one person because one is a million. But I do have 5 rapid fire questions for you, if that's
Oh
okay.
my goodness. Okay.
Uh,
Ah.
they're fun. They're fun ones. It's just to get to know Beverly a little bit. So,
Okay.
what's your favorite food?
Um, Italian,
Mm. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Santorini in Greece,
Mm. What's your favorite way to take care of yourself?
massage.
Name one book that changed your life. I know it's hard to name one.
The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Awesome. And do you have one tip or one takeaway for the listeners? You already gave so many, but if you were to highlight one.
um, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of finding out who you are now and what you feel, because you need to find that out to grow and become a more beautiful person that has a thriving life. Walk through that fear to get to the other side.
Thank you. That was beautiful. So I'm going to put everything in the show notes, of course, for
Okay.
so people can find you. But if you wanted to just mention what's the best or quickest way for the listeners to find you.
Yes, you can go to my website and it's called herselfexpression.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for coming on and having this conversation. We were supposed to do this a while back and it didn't happen. It's happening now and for a reason. I believe things
Yeah.
when they're supposed to. It was really and truly a great, great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I had a wonderful time.
Me too. So thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim and I will see you next time.